and welcome to Season 1, Episode 24 of Pro Wrestling's Top 50. I'm your host, Travis McNeil, and today we continue our countdown of the top 50 matches of 2020 with match number 27 on our list, which was the 30-man Royal Rumble match from the Royal Rumble held back on the 26th of January. I think the Royal Rumble is probably the easiest bet at the most entertaining match all year. Just the format lends itself to that, but it can also be one of the most frustrating matches all year when it doesn't have that entertainment value, which unfortunately we've seen quite a few times over the past decade. But that said, this was probably the most unique Royal Rumble match that the WWE's ever done. They centered it around Brock Lesnar, who was the WWE champion. He chose to enter number one, and essentially he felt like he really didn't have too much more to prove in the WWE, so he wanted to win the Royal Rumble once again, having previously won it in 2003. He wanted to do it from the number one spot, and he wanted to do it as a WWE champion, so essentially he wanted to make history with all of this. I think Brock Lesnar is one of the most talented performers in pro wrestling history. I think he gets a lot of flack for, how he's been used since his return, holding the title for long chunks of time with sporadic appearances. I kind of don't really have a problem with that because the WWE essentially has two world titles and has a lot of secondary titles as well. So I feel like it was a missed opportunity to just use that time to legitimize the other titles. I think there was ways working around Brock's schedule, but using him to elevate other people. He is a very, very giving pro wrestler. When the situation calls for it, he makes guys look great. He can also eat wrestlers alive, but that's when he's booked to do that. And it just makes, that giving, mean more when somebody is able to get the best of him. I think his initial run from 2002 to 2004 is one of the best short runs a pro wrestler has ever had. And if you weren't a fan back then, I highly suggest going and watching his, him wreak havoc on SmackDown as the WWE champion, because it's incredible stuff and it's a very different side of him than what you would see, if you've only watched Lesnar the past, 10 years or so since he came back. I think he can do it all too. He can be, a monster, menacing. He can also play, a chicken shit heel really, really well. He can do comedy. He's incredibly versatile. And this felt like a celebration of Brock Lesnar and that he got a lot of time to play a lot of different roles in this match. It was focused around him and it was very, very smart. They did a really funny opening with Elias coming out and singing a funny song about being the sacrificial lamb, before Lesnar wrecked him. And I really enjoyed this because the Royal Rumble each year, it's got 30 guys, right? The WWE's roster doesn't have a depth of 30 people that you think legitimately stand a chance of winning the Royal Rumble. So every year, you get excited as each, entrant's going to come out, and then you get a lot of duds. They were very, very smart with what they did here because they got the duds out of the way early. And it created this, spotlight for Lesnar where it made him look great. He took everybody to Suplex City and he, was cocky and arrogant while he did it and made, snide comments. And it was really, really well done. You had guys like Bobby Roode and, nothing wrong with these performers, but again, they're not going to win the Royal Rumble and they were used really well. I did find John Morrison kind of getting squashed at number 5 a little bit odd. He had just made his return to WWE and he's always kind of been one of those like Royal Rumble spotlight guys, so that was a little strange, but whatever. They did a really good job here where the first time that Lesnar really found himself at a disadvantage was because he had some of his enemies that he'd been feuding with over the past couple of months come into the match in succession. So rather than eliminate him, he took him to Suplex City and played with him a little bit, and it almost caused his downfall. He had Kofi Kingston come in. He had just beat Kofi for the WWE title, so there was a grudge there. He had Rey Mysterio come in. He had just battled Rey Mysterio at Survivor Series over that title and did a feud, involving Rey's son. So he kind of played around with them until Big E made the save for his friend Kofi and Rey as well. He stood up to Brock, made him look really, really strong and good. They hit a great sequence where Kofi hit the Trouble in Paradise, Big E hit the big ending, Rey hit the 619. They had Brock on the ropes, but they went for one move too many. They tried to do like a poetry in motion where Rey, ran off Big E's back. Brock caught him in midair and threw him right over the top rope, then ran himself, jumped off Big E's back, hit a clothesline on Kofi, and eliminated both of them. And again, it just showed how incredible Brock is. From there, the match smartly transitioned because now you have Brock, who's a little tired after that sequence, and now you bring out some bigger guys that again still don't have a chance at winning the Royal Rumble, but are a little bit more of a legitimate threat to Brock, like Nakamura and like Cesaro. So it just wears Brock down a little bit more. Those guys are a little bit harder for him to eliminate. You had a good spot where Shelton Benjamin came out, and again, it just shows Brock's range. He played buddy-buddy with them, only to then turn on him like he did everybody else. MVP made a return, which at the time, kind of seemed a little weird, but he turned out to be a huge highlight in 2020 for WWE. One of the few highlights they've had, in my opinion, because the Hurt Business turned out to be a pretty good stable and helped, re-legitimize Lashley. From there, you get the Keith Lee spot, which I think was the spot coming out of the Rumble that everybody really liked. He stood toe-to-toe with Brock. Brock did an amazing job selling him by, going like, who's this big fella? And whoa, that's a big boy, and all that stuff to Paul Heyman, which really put Lee over. He got a great sequence with Lesnar. They brought in Braun, and to commentary's credit, all match they had hyped the potential of Brock Lesnar having to break Braun Strowman's elimination record. So here comes Braun. Lesnar, seems like he's going to get out by these two big behemoths, but unfortunately, they decide to focus on each other rather than doing the smart thing and getting Lesnar out of there. He capitalizes, eliminates them both, actually ties Strowman's record by eliminating Strowman, which was kind of cool. And then from there, we build into Brock's elimination, which was just so well done. So we have Ricochet come out. Brock kind of casts him aside, and toys with him a little bit. They had an interaction on Raw where Brock just completely disrespected him by giving him a low blow. So same thing, Brock Lesnar's a monster, but he can still be a jerk and low blow someone if he wants to. That leads to the Drew McIntyre entrance. An incredible, intense stare down between those two guys. McIntyre was just amazing, just saying, I've wanted this for years. Lesnar, sells, Drew being a threat, he takes his gloves off, and just as they're ready to square off, Ricochet comes up behind, low blows Lesnar, paying off that spot from Raw, and Drew hits the Claymore to send Lesnar over the top rope. The pop for it is massive. The crowd goes ballistic. Brock is phenomenal in selling the elimination. It builds the WrestleMania match, and it was just such a good moment. It was so well done. And as someone that's been a fan of Drew McIntyre since he started, that watched him through the indies and hoped for the best for him, to see him climb that WWE mountain, it was very satisfying for me as a fan. They do an awesome job in the follow-up with that. Lesnar stays on the floor for, several entrances, selling the Claymore, which put it over super well. Drew throws Ricochet out with relative ease to taunt Lesnar, basically saying, you toyed with this guy, you should have thrown him over the top like I did. The Miz comes in, and Drew immediately just knocks him out with the Claymore, and again taunts Lesnar after that to throw, more salt in his wounds, and it just did an awesome job building up WrestleMania. From there, this match shifts away from the Lesnar story into more of a traditional Royal Rumble match. But the nice thing is, we're over halfway through, so everybody that's going to come in, for the most part, unless they're being used for storyline purposes for other guys in the match, have, a somewhat legitimate shot at winning the Royal Rumble. So it kept it really exciting. You didn't have that long slow down period with a bunch of guys in the ring that most of the Rumbles had, and this led to the surprise return of Edge, which was incredible. Whenever we get close to the Royal Rumble, I stop paying attention to wrestling news because I don't want any spoilers. I didn't expect this to happen. The fact that it happened mid-match with no hype and just as music hitting was the best way to do it. It was a legitimate surprise. He looked great. He was an emotional coming out, and it was just so very, very cool. And the crazy thing is, when I rewatched this match for the project, I'd actually forgotten about that. So it surprised me the second time that his music just hit. It was really cool. They did the RKO, reunion with Orton, which was kind of nice and obviously, led into their feud coming out of the Rumble. One thing that I found interesting on the rewatch is they had Aleister Black come out at 28 and presented him as like on the level of all the main event guys that were still in the match, and it just shows the difference a year makes, because at the end of 2020 when I watched this again, he's nowhere to be found on Monday Night Raw. Seth Rollins was incredible in this. He came out with all his goons, the AOP and Buddy Murphy, and he was just an awesome sleazeball. They would catch him when he'd get thrown over the top. They helped him eliminate a bunch of guys, and it seemed like Rollins was going to steal a Royal Rumble win. The second year in a row he would have won, but this year he would have slime balled his way to it. That didn't happen because they had basically a task force of Kevin Owens, Samoa Joe, and Aleister Black that ran off Seth's goons. And then when he felt abandoned, there was a really cool spot where Roman Reigns was in the match and he tried to put out his fist and reform the Shield to help him, and it led to him getting tossed. The final four here was Drew and three former Rumble winners in Edge, Orton, and Reigns. Because Drew got the big Lesnar elimination, you could tell that's where they were headed for for WrestleMania with that match. So it didn't feel like Drew needed to win the match. They could do the title shot with one of those other guys. But I really appreciated that they didn't. It gave Drew even more momentum. There was a really, kind of funny spot where Orton went to turn on Edge. Edge caught him. Orton just kind of shrugged. But then Edge turned on Orton and threw him out, which again led into the next night with, the Orton beatdown of Edge and their feud. They did a, battle of the spears with Reigns and Edge, which was kind of cool. And Edge finally hit his and it got a good pop. They had Reigns eliminate Edge, which was super smart because it got tons of heat on Roman. And then even though technically going into this match, Drew was kind of a bit of a heel, this cemented, a babyface turn for him, right? He eliminated Big Bad Brock Lesnar, and then Roman, after just eliminating Edge, who everybody wanted to see win, McIntyre shockingly eliminated him to another huge pop. So the Royal Rumble match is long. That's why this video went a little bit longer than you might normally see. This was great. It was just a great piece of work. It was somewhat reminiscent to one of the Aztec Warfare matches that Lucha Underground did. I believe it was the second one where they presented Matanza as just this unstoppable force. So it wouldn't surprise me if WWE borrowed a little bit from that with how they presented Lesnar. Like I said, it was just a great, a great showcase of Brock Lesnar, but then the back half was also one of the better overall Royal Rumble matches I think there's ever been. The Rumble for 2020 was incredibly memorable. It held up in a rewatch. It was tons of fun. It had a satisfying winner and lots of good little spots throughout. And really, that's all you can ask for that match. And that's why it makes it a very worthwhile inclusion on this year's list. That's all the time we have for today, though. Of course, you can catch this match on the WWE Network. Please subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Follow on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling50, and join me again tomorrow as we continue to count down pro wrestling.